Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. Today's video, we're going to be continuing our analysis of the third word. Now, let's briefly summarize what we've read so far. So this chapter of the Risale-i Nur starts by referencing a verse from the Quran. O you people, worship. Now, worship here in this context means giving alms to the poor, fasting, doing the five obligatory prayers. And the Risale-i Nur tells us that there is great profit and happiness found in worship. And it gives us an analogy to help illustrate this point. So, in this analogy, there are two soldiers who are ordered to go to the city. So they're going down the path, and at some point the path forks off. And at the fork, there is another man who gives them instructions. He tells them, look, most people who take the right path succeed, okay? But most people who take the left path fail. Now, the right path is under military control. And if you take that path, you're going to need to carry a rifle and a kit bag full of rations with you. If you take the left path, however, you don't have to carry anything. Okay? So the two soldiers listen, and one of the soldiers decides to take the right path. So he takes the kit bag with him, he takes the rifle with him, and he goes down the right path. The other man, however, decides to leave the army and take the left path without having to without having to carry anything. Okay? And so these two men end up having very different experiences. The man who takes the right path does succeed and does make profit, and he's able to defend himself against any enemies using his rifle, and he's able to feed himself using his rations. But the other man, because he doesn't have rations nor a rifle, so he doesn't have weapons to protect himself, he experiences many calamities. Okay, so these two men represent something. Okay, the man who takes the right path represents the believer who has submitted to the religion of God and who worships God. The man who takes the left path represents the disbeliever who has turned away from the religion of God and does not worship God. Okay, so let's see what the Risale-i Nur has to say here. Indeed, like with every so أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Indeed, like with every true virtue, the source of courage is belief in God and worship. And as with every true and as with every iniquity, the source of cowardice is misguidance. So let's try to understand what the Risale-i Nur is saying. So where does courage stem from? The Risale-i Nur says that courage stems from belief and worship. Okay? So let's go back to our analogy, the story to understand this, okay? So the two men take two separate paths, okay? Now, once again, what do these two men that represent or symbolize, okay? Now, the man who takes the right path, remember, he represents the believer, okay? He's submitted to the religion of God. He is submitted to God, and he worships God, okay? So what does the man who takes the right path do? He stays in the army, and he agrees to be under military control. And he takes a kit bag and rifle with him. Now, what does the kit bag and rifle represent? We talked about this in our previous video. The kit bag represents the kit bag full of rations represents man's infinite needs. We always need something. Our needs are endless. Okay, so we always need for example, we always need sustenance. Okay, we always need water. We always need food. We always need oxygen. But we also have needs beyond this life. So, for example, we want eternal life. Like, think about it. Would you want to die and perish into non-existence? You wouldn't, right? You would want to continue living. Um, However, and the rifle represents man's infinite enemies. So we have infinite enemies. An enemy doesn't have to be someone who's trying to kill or rob you, okay? It can be something that poses a harm to you, maybe to your livelihood, maybe to your sustenance, okay? We talked about this. Like a sickness, like COVID-19, can be an enemy. A natural disaster can be an enemy. A decline in the economy can be an enemy, okay? So we always have an enemy. A problem that you're experiencing can also be an enemy. So we always have enemies, and we always have needs. We always have desires. Now, how do we secure our needs and defend ourselves against our enemies? Well, what does the man who take the right path do? he gets a rifle, and he gets rations. What does the believer do? He worships God and he seeks refuge in God. So he worships God in order to secure his needs. He makes prayer, makes supplications to God. He worships God, he gives alms, he prays. And what does he do? What does he do? So he seeks refuge in God. He seeks refuge in him. Okay, so he prays to God for his protection, for his help, and he does the different forms of worship in order to secure his needs. So those represent the rifle and the rations. Okay, so how does belief and worship give us courage? Well, why does the man who take the right path? It describes it here in the Risale-i Nur. He had gone on his way being obliged to no one, so he's not indebted to anyone, fearing no one, so he's fearless, he's not fearful, and with an easy heart and conscience, so he's not distressed. He's not distressed. He's not ill at ease. Why is that? Well, what does he have to fear? What does the other man fear? Because he doesn't have a rifle and the rations, the other man, what does he fear? He fears enemies. He fears that he may not be able to meet his needs. The other man doesn't fear those things. Why? Because if he encounters any enemies, he can protect himself using his rifle. If he ever gets hungry, he can just, use the rations. He has a kit bag with him, right? So like that, so he doesn't have anything to fear. Just like that, the believer doesn't have to be cowardly. He doesn't have to fear anything. Why? Because he is able to secure his needs, his desires by worshiping God, and he's able to protect himself he's able to protect himself against his enemies by seeking refuge in God, by praying, by making supplications to God. Okay, and remember, the path on the right is under military control. Okay, just like that, when the believer acknowledges, the believer knows that the universe is under God's control, that also puts him at ease. Whereas the other path, the path on the left, is anarchic. It's anarchy. It's lawless. It's not under military control. Okay. It's much better knowing that everything is under God's control. Whereas if you believe that it's chaos, it's lawless. Okay. There is no one that it is not under control. Okay. So, courage, the source of courage, stems from belief and worship. And it says here, and as with every iniquity, the source of cowardice is misguidance. Now, what is cowardice? Cowardice is basically the opposite of courage. While the soldier who leaves the army and takes the left path represents the disbeliever who is misguided. Now, why is he misguided? Because he doesn't worship God, he doesn't recognize God, and he doesn't submit to the religion of God. And how does that cause him suffering, right? Why does that lead him to being cowardly? Because he's taking a path, right? The soldier, the deserter actually, he takes a path that's not under military control, right? So he's fearful, right? It's not under the control of his army. What's more is he doesn't have a rifle with him to protect himself against his enemies, and he doesn't have rations to provide for himself. Okay? So what does that mean? The disbeliever doesn't seek refuge in God because he doesn't even believe in God. He doesn't recognize God. He doesn't submit to God. Okay? So he can't secure his needs. He is unable to secure his needs and his desires because he doesn't worship God. And he's unable to protect himself against his enemies because he doesn't seek refuge in God. Okay? So misguidance, cowardice, comes from misguidance. Continuing, in fact, for a worshiper with a truly illuminated heart, it is possible that even if the globe of the earth became a bomb and exploded, it would not frighten him. He would watch it with pleasurable wonder as a marvel of the eternally besought one's power. But when a famous degenerate philosopher with a so-called enlightened mind but no heart saw a comet in the sky, he trembled on the ground and exclaimed anxiously, "Isn't that comet going to hit the earth?" On one occasion, America was quaking with fear at such a comet, and many people left their homes in the middle of the night. So once again, we'll stop here. So what does it mean here when it's talking about, so in fact, for a worshiper with a truly illuminated heart? Now, in my humble opinion, I think what this means is When we're talking about illuminated, what does illuminated mean? Illuminated means to light up. Okay, so let's say you enter a room and the room's dark. So what do? You might turn the light on, you might get a flashlight, whatever it is, right? What does that do? Like let's say a lantern. What does a lantern do? It illuminates the darkness. It lights it up. So I think when it's talking about a worshiper with a truly illuminated heart, this is a worshiper, okay, who truly knows, who truly realizes that everything, the entire universe is under God's control, okay? And it says here, it is possible even if the globe of the earth became a bomb and exploded, it would not frighten him. He would not be scared because he knows it's under God's control. Even if he were to die, once again, there's the afterlife, right? Because the worshiper believes in an afterlife. He doesn't believe in eternal nothingness. So he knows even if the world exploded, even if I died, I would go to the afterlife and hopefully to paradise, okay? He would watch it with pleasurable wonder as a marvel of the eternally besought one's powers. If something like this happened, if the world exploded, he would see it as a manifestation of God's might, of his power. But when a famous degenerate philosopher with a so-called enlightened mind, but no heart, saw a comet in the sky, he trembled on the ground and exclaimed anxiously, "Isn't that comet going to hit the earth?" Now, why does the famous, so why does this philosopher see why is this philosopher afraid compared to the worshiper? Now, around the 17th century, people in the European world started heavily leaning into the discovery of science, and they started leaning into science and philosophy. Okay, and they were making all these discoveries, and that's good. But the problem was that they ended up severing their ties with God. And what's up happening is that when you sever your ties with God, right, you become misguided. What ends up happening is that when something like a comet appears in the sky, right, that something that could kill you, you're afraid because you don't believe in God. You don't believe that the universe is under God's control. And when that comet, if it hits you, you could just become nothing. Okay, that's terrifying. Now, I'm going to stop here. I hope you guys were able to learn something from this video. Let's, of course, briefly summarize what we've read. So I think the essential, what the important point to remember here is that. Once again, perspective. In the second word, we also talked about this. Belief changes your vision of the world. Belief. So the believer is the man is able to secure his needs and is able to fortify himself against his enemies by worshiping God and seeking refuge in him. Okay. And he's able, however, if that believer doesn't do that, if he doesn't recognize God, if he doesn't believe or worship him, he ends up causing immense suffering to himself. And what I find interesting about man is that, like, what I find interesting is that sometimes, like, some people like don't believe in God, or they don't like conform to a certain religious faith because like they don't want to. They find it more easier if they didn't have to do any religious obligations or any of that stuff. But what ends up happening is they actually end up causing more suffering to themselves. Yeah, we were talking about the kit bag and the rifle in the previous video. It talks about how the kit bag and the rifle has an apparent burden to it. Okay, like if it it talks about an apparent burden in worship, right? Because when you have to take the kit bag and the rifle, those things are heavy, right? Like you may not want to carry those stuff when you're going down the path. Just like that, worship can also be a bit burdensome sometimes. You might not want to give your wealth to the poor. It can be difficult. Like I would know, like fasting 30 days in the year, like praying 5 times a day. These things can be burdensome, but there is great, as we mentioned in the previous video, there is ease and lightness in worship. Okay, because you're able to connect to God, and once again, you're able to secure your needs and fortifying yourself against your enemies. Okay, but if you're like, I don't want to do like religious obligations, right? Like I just don't want to deal with that kind of stuff, right? Because you don't want to deal with that. You don't want that burden. You end up loading an even heavier burden on yourself because you don't believe in God, and so you have all these needs, you have all these enemies, and you don't have someone you can seek refuge in, someone you don't have the maker, the creator, to seek refuge in. You can't seek his help, right? Because you've rejected him. You don't worship him, okay? So I'm going to stop here. I hope you guys were able to learn something from this video, and inshallah, I will see you guys. I will see you guys next time.